The F-22 Raptor, the king jet of the sky, taking fuel over the Middle East. This is the airplane that kicked in Iran's front door on the 1st of March. S-300s suppressed, Bavara 373s suppressed, corridors, silent corridors cut open for everything else coming behind it. And in 5 months of war, Iranian radars have never once managed to lock onto it. And yesterday, the President of the United States looked at a room full of reporters and said that Iran gets a chance before decapitation. Not a metaphor, the word out loud in the Oval Office. It's August 4th, 2026. Hope you're doing great wherever you're watching from. Here's what's happened in the last 24 hours. Qatar says drafts of an agreement are circulating. Iran says there's no talks with the United States. The President of the United States says there are some talks. And we have a breaking quote from President Trump on Truth Social. Iranian leadership is unbelievably duplicitous. They ask for a meeting, some would say beg, talks begin with more scheduled in the immediate future, and they say openly and proudly that there's not any discussions, that nothing is being talked about, and that they're only dealing with Oman. Then they go on to give their usual blather in saying the Strait of Hormuz will be operated powerfully by them when it is already completely controlled by the United States Navy and our blockade, or as some would say, the United States wall of steel. Nothing gets through to Iran unless we want it to, and nothing gets through unless a deal or total surrender is accomplished. Whether Iran wants to admit it or not, we are, in fact, talking of a solution to a problem that they have caused for decades. It is very simple. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Iran being duplicitous. We've never seen this before. This is the first time. Wow, they're busting out a new playbook. Good job, Iran. You guys can adapt. Would you go to some retreat and learn to heal your gaslighting ways? Well, Iran says there's no talks at all. Meanwhile, they're propping up their Houthis with the last bit of money that they have. Their economy is being completely bled dry. And also, the Houthis put a drone into a Saudi airport again this morning. 6 Saudi tankers are running all the way around Africa to avoid the Red Sea, and Iran just told its own people to turn off the lights because their power grid is so strained. And there's gas and oil shortages in one of the most oil-rich countries on the entire planet. But here's what we're going to cover in depth today. F-22 Raptors. The reason why CENTCOM is flexing them right now. Just an hour ago from the time of this video being made, CENTCOM is showing the F-22 Raptor refueling. And here's something amazing about the F-22 that no one else is going to tell you. The F-22 can actually carry the GBU-39 small diameter bomb and GBU-32 JDAMs inside the airframe. It can super cruise, and it can go into places in Iran that no other jet can go because of its next level ability of stealth. So if, let's say, the decapitation campaign kicks back off, striking Iranian leadership, striking more IRGC headquarters, the F-22, not only doing air-to-air, but it can be the one going in as basically the highest level assassin in the United States Air Force to strike down the IRGC. And then we've got some wild hot topics today that you guys got to stick around for. China flooded Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea with warships and missile-armed bombers, cruise missile armed bombers. Turkey has an unmanned fighter that opened its weapons bays for the first time and unleashed something that you're going to want to know about. And then Italian Marines came down a rope onto a Russian tanker in broad daylight. I'll be breaking down that entire story, so stick around for that. That's in the global roundup about 3/4 of the way through the video. So Iran spent 5 months announcing that it controls the Strait of Hormuz and it can shoot down any American stealth fighter, but then the US military basically said, hold my F-22, watch this. But now let's start with what just happened, the contradiction, because this is kind of the whole effort of Iran at this point. Remember, they're telling their citizens to stop using electricity while they present strength to the United States. So they see Oman as someone that they can manipulate a lot better than the United States. I mean, given they're right there, right next to them, and they kind of have been extorting them and manipulating them for decades. I mean, if you look at the fact that Iran owns pretty much all the islands in the Strait of Hormuz, and Oman doesn't have any naval presence to back up and reinforce their side, this just shows that Iran is looking for the weakest point, and they know that the United States is definitely not that. With a wall of steel that is shoving Iran's ships back in. And I said ships. For the record, this is something that makes Iran extremely nervous, and it makes them not want to negotiate with the United States at all. We know at this point that Oman and Iran are talking to each other, and it looks like the US is talking to them as well. Of course, Iran is going to try to save their own necks and talk to the United States and then deny it publicly to their people. Because remember, if they need to keep their people in check while they're doing this rationing of oil, rationing of gas, basically giving all the oil and gas to the military, they've got to tell their people they're winning, or the people might start to question the government even more. And that makes Iran extremely nervous. Remember, that's their number one goal. Put their people in check, gaslight their people, and then ultimately murder them if they have to. At the end of the day, Iran now is looking at what's happening to them, their ability to not pay their fighters anymore, and they're getting extremely nervous at this point, knowing that they could have a decapitation strike coming any second. And what that would come from would likely be an F-22 Raptor, along with F-15Es, F-18s, other jets. But that F-22, that's the hero jet of today. We just saw it on CENTCOM's X page. 2 Pratt & Whitney F-119 engines with thrust vectoring. Also Super Cruise, means it goes supersonic, doesn't have to be in max afterburner. Maybe it should be in max afterburner. Maybe that's a flaw, not a feature. No, that's definitely a feature. It gives it massive amounts of efficiency to go up high, go fast, not be as visible on infrared sensors because it doesn't have to be in max afterburner to go supersonic. It covers ground fast also without burning as much fuel. 186 of these beasts have been built. Production ended in 2011, but here's the irony. America stopped building the best air dominance fighter on Earth 15 years ago because there was really no enemy worth building it for. It has spent this war proving that wrong. We've seen that the F-22 has been used in Venezuela, it has been used in Iran, and it's the stalwart. Stalwart? Pretty sure stalwart is a word. If not, I'm bringing it back. I'm making it up, potentially. But what it did on the 1st of March is basically the only sentences that you need to know. The Raptors went in first against Iran's S-300 batteries and the Bavar 373. That's their interceptor missiles that Tehran spent years advertising as the answer to American air power. Suppressed both and cut corridors for everything that followed. Across 9 days, Iran fired dozens of surface-to-air missiles, and US officials said not one ever successfully tracked or locked on to the F-22 stealth fighter. Here's how it fights though, because people might think it's only an air superiority fighter, but everything goes inside of this beast. GBU-39 small diameter bombs and GBU-32 JDAMs in internal bays, because the second you hang a weapon on the pylon, you have compromised the stealth at least somewhat. Every external store is a corner reflector, and a radar that could never see the jet could absolutely see the actual bomb on the jet. So that's why you don't see these F-22s hanging anything on the wings unless it's fuel tanks while they're transiting, while they're going cross country. But it doesn't do it alone. Remember, CENTCOM described layered packages early on with B-2s, EA-18G Growlers, so Iranian radar operators were hunting something they could not see while a jammer sat on the frequency it needed to find it. So you're distracting the IRGC, you're showing some 4th generation fighters and some 5th generation fighters, and oh, by the way, you gotta have gas, and that's why we're seeing the shout out to this KC-135 Stratotanker crew. Remember, this is what actually helps air power actually work. You have to have the combat legs to get things done. The Raptor's combat radius is basically extended indefinitely by what those aerial refuelers can do. And what you do as a fighter pilot is you get to the battle just before crossing into hostile territory, take a quick squirt of gas, top off, and then roll in, execute your combat mission, and then come back and get your squirt of gas after. And aerial refueling, something I noticed, some people might think it's just kind of automatic and easy. It's honestly can be some of the most challenging parts of your entire flight, because you could be in a thunderstorm, could be bumpy, you might need to get back into the fight as soon as possible, so there's a lot of pressure to get gas extremely quickly, and that can push you to a point where refueling becomes incredibly challenging. What I would do is just wiggle my fingers and toes, just be on point, stay dialed in, keep the nervous system ready to rock. So not only is Iran getting its ships pushed back in, now it's getting its aircraft and drones pushed back in, because the F-22 Raptor is the ultimate in air superiority. So maybe we're seeing more flights of the F-22 Raptor because Iran has been launching so many drones at partner nations over the last couple couple weeks. F-22, not necessarily the one to shoot them down, but the radar in that F-22, that is the primary radar to track and spot any of these drones basically as soon as they blast off. But Iran hasn't stopped talking for months. Major General Ali Abdali, head of Iran's wartime military command, I'm pretty sure he's best friends with General Tuna and Salami. They're all this little weird threesome that hangs out and decides, hey, who's going to push the red button of drones today? But they said the United States is moving at an accelerated pace to fan the flames of a full-scale regional war. Well, I think you're kind of calling the kettle black at this point as you launch ballistic missiles into neighborhoods. Their quote was that America will burn in the fire of war, and the IRGC declared it maintains full control of the Strait of Hormuz and warned that a stranger who has come from thousands of miles away will not be allowed to interfere. Well, you are sitting on an international waterway where all of the world's energy flows through, so strangers from thousands of miles away are paying you money hand over fist. What about China? China's a few thousand miles away, and you seem to be okay with that because they're buying your black market oil. So yeah, interesting that you're picking and choosing who you're calling someone from thousands of miles away not interfering. Good job, IRGC. I guess it turns out the IRGC continues their streak of not making any sense, but being the country that's never won a war but never lost a negotiation. Good job, little buddy. Nice work. But now the honesty check, because you got to be real about Iran's threats at this point. Ballistic missiles are real. They reached Jordanian airspace. We know that. The most recent volley was shot down. And now the whole goal is to squeeze the money out of the mullahs. Squeeze the mullahs. Mullah money. Get rid of that mullah money. Nobody wants that mullah money flowing to the mullahs anymore, because what they're doing is they're just using it to buy ballistic missiles, drones, and cause chaos in the Middle East. So now, seeing all this military force, we've got strikes that have happened over the past 2 weeks, massive strikes, hitting infrastructure in the Strait of Hormuz, F-22 Raptors up overhead with those 250-pound GBU-39s that are primed for taking down leadership. And then you've got the blockade. The blockade's just sitting there, that wall of steel, making sure that Iran doesn't have the ability to get money from their shadow fleet, from their illicit shadow sale of oil. And then you team that up with the different sanctions that are actually real, legitimate sanctions, with 1,000+ mullahs being said to be personally sanctioned. And now there's actually sanctions that are doing something. And that's likely why we're seeing the massive rampant inflation in Iran. We're going to get to the 40 chess section in a second, but before we do that, the global roundup section is wild today. First, the Type 071 amphibious transport dock fled into gray zone water near the different shoals in the South China Sea. Overhead, at least 2 H-6K bombers configured for maritime strike carrying YJ-12 supersonic anti-ship missiles from China with a KJ-500. That's like their AWACS, their airborne warning and control systems. So yeah, you got your acronym for the day as well. But the PLA Southern Theater Command called it safeguarding sovereignty. Everybody reading that radar picture called it what it was. 120 nautical miles off the Philippines, China just rehearsed the opening moves of a blockade with real steel and real missiles. And Philippine warships couldn't necessarily answer at this point. So would more American metal be needed in that theater pretty soon? Probably will cover that on a full video. Next story. Turkey's unmanned fighter opened up its bay. The Bazakar Kizamela, yeah, something like that, did not announce itself with underwing pylons this time. On the 25th of July at Korlu, the serial production airframe that's been used for testing opened its internal weapons bay and dropped a Rokistan Tiber 82, a guided kit on a 500-pound Mark 82, and it hit the target. So it's a drone dropping a 500-pound bomb. 3 days later, it did it again with the Asalin Tulin P penetrating glide bomb. First time an air-to-ground oriented unmanned fighter has released ordnance from inside its own fuselage to try to maintain more of a stealth capability there. And then the third story, the one that you've probably been waiting for because it's pretty wild. The tanker Toy Payot was running under a Cameroon flag. It had switched to only the week before. Oh, weird. Yeah, we just happened to switch countries. Yeah, we just moved. No big deal. But this was another piece of Russia's sanction-busting oil network boarded in broad daylight by Italians. So just Pretty wild to think about. But that brings us to the 40 chess strategic analysis section, my friends. So here's the connection we've kind of hinted at, but nobody else is really making the connection. So Iran wants to make a deal with Oman only, right? They want to leave the United States out of it. However, basically the biggest wall of steel on the entire planet is sitting in their backyard in the Strait of Hormuz, allowing millions of barrels of oil to flow through the strait. It's been recorded, millions of barrels, over 1,000 ships have been allowed to transit through the strait since the conflict. So the US Navy is absolutely putting the mullahs in check, and they hate it. They hate the fact that the US Navy is right there, making them have to make a deal with Oman. They don't want to do that either. But they certainly don't want their people to think they're talking with the United States. Because remember, if they're able to control their people, make the people think that the United States are the evil ones, then that gives them more leverage to control a population that's getting more and more restless as they're telling them to limit their electricity use, oil and gas shortages. Do you guys kind of see what could be being set up here soon? Let me know what you think's being set up here soon in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Go ahead and follow me on X, follow me on Instagram. I'm posting there pretty much every day. And go to maxafterburnerenergy.com. Join my email list so you can be notified when new content drops. You'll get a weekly roundup of content, and we've got merch and energy drinks over there that I think you'll really enjoy. Thanks so much for watching, guys. This is Ryan, also known as Max Afterburner, signing off.